Ladies and gentlemen, my name is SEAN PATRiCK SULLiVAN, and today I am so moist because it is hot and humid here at LEE ROTH United Memorial Church, and not only because this is the most interesting and up-and-coming center for the performing arts in all of Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. I am here, look over here, everybody, look over here. I am here with my very good friend, JASON THOMPSON. JASON is an actor, a clown, a comedian, a raconteur, and one of my inspirations in the local comedy scene. JASON, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sean.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
You look very handsome today.
As you do.
I know. So I know that you really hate all of this stuff, but nonetheless, I have to know, could you please, for the people out there who haven't had the pleasure of meeting you yet, where were you born? How did you get into doing what you're doing?
I was born in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, 62 years ago. And then, yes, I grew up in Calgary, spent a semester at the University of Calgary in the drama department, and then quit. I thought I didn't know anything about acting then. I still don't. I'm not trying to be disingenuous, but I think it has, like other art forms, you have to live a bit first, and I found it a little too sterile in the university setting. So I dropped out, went to Edmonton right after I dropped out to meet a friend of mine who was at the University of Alberta. And we had done a Fringe show the year before, which I think was Edmonton's first Fringe, possibly 1981. And we decided, 82, and then we decided to do it again in 83, 84. So maybe the first Edmonton Fringe was 83, and then we did another one, 84. And we did we wanted to do something wacky. So we did a version of Kafka's Metamorphosis.
Stop moving the camera, JASON.
Sorry. And we needed a hook. We needed an angle. Instead of the protagonist, Gregor Samsa, metamorphizing into an insect, we had him metamorphize into a gay leather queen. Two of us were handcuffed together, and that was the big reveal.
So wait a minute, what year was this?
This was 84.
So cruising was still in the air?
Cruising was a major inspiration for it, and I stole a lot of the visual details from that film for the play.
As Charlie Kirk knows, that movie had so much truth in it. We'll talk about that later.
One of the best ever. The play turned out to be, our version of the Metamorphosis turned out to be so bad that it became a phenomenon.
Showgirls of its time.
The showgirls of its time, literally with block-long queues to get in and everything.
Are you serious?
Yeah. We made a ton of money.
So as it was happening, were you shocked? Like, were you like, what, I can't believe this is happening?
Absolutely. And there was in order to promote the show, my theater partner, Brian McGugan, it was either his mother or my mother. They both came down and supported the show. We had Kafka t-shirts printed. One of them rented a portable smoke machine, like a fog machine. And we went around promoting it by blasting. This is in the early 80s, you can get away with it. We were blasting sidewalk patios and handing out leaflets, blasting them with our smoke machine. The smoke machine became part of our arsenal. And during the play, if you're familiar with the short story by Kafka, in the short story, at some point, the landlady of the place that Gregor Samsa is living in, the boarding house, she after he's transformed into the dung beetle, I believe she blasts him with something approximating the smoke machine. That's why we got it. So that's why it was included in the show. Anyway, we ended up using it in the show, and using it to blast one of the characters in the show. And on one of the nights when it was sold out, a local Canadian celebrity turned up. He was a newscaster by the name of Knowlton Nash, before your time. But he was like I don't know what the current newscaster is on CBC, but he was like the face of the CBC for decades. And for some reason, he was in the front row, and we blasted him with the smoke machine. And there was also a reporter there for the Edmonton Sun. And the next day, the review came out, and it was, "This show is so bad, it's a must-see." They mentioned I believe they mentioned the Knowlton Nash incident. So it was great publicity for the show.
Have you ever considered the possibility that due to where you were and the time that you did this, That Jordan Peterson might have been in your audience?
Peterson, I don't know.
Well, there's no way to know, but it's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, we're the same age, Peterson and I. It's possible if he was, I don't know if he was a theater person or not.
So, because based on what you're telling me, this seems like it must have been quite formative for his career and worldview.
For Peterson?
Yes.
That's very flattering. Yeah, I don't know. I'd be curious. I doubt it somehow. I think his big transformation was after he read The Road to Wigan Pier by George Orwell, not Kafka, which is definitely a transformative book. Absolutely.
But there's something to be said for priming the pump, Jason Thompson.
Yes, there is. And blowing the balloon. I completely agree.
All right. So please go back to your story. My apologies for interrupting. I'm going to put my glasses back on so I can reclaim that fat Stanley Tucci alter ego of mine.
Oh, Swifty Lazar.
All right. That's who.
Yeah. So after that, I thought I always wanted to do stand up. And I lived in Alberta for years and it was boring. And I'd never been outside of, I'd been to Europe and the States with my family, but not the rest of Canada. So I thought I would go to Toronto like absolutely everybody else does and see what was going on there. I went to Yuck Yucks once as an audience member. That was it. And it was discouraging.
Why?
I tried to heckle and the bouncers told me to shut up. And I didn't think that was very sporting of them. So it was a bit of a buzzkill. But I wanted to, and I'm glad they told me to shut up because I wasn't funny and I had nothing to say. I still don't. But I wanted to express myself.
Which is why you only begrudgingly agreed to do this episode.
That's right. That's right. But I am a blabbermouth, so I thank you for...
You love talking, except when someone desperately needs you to.
Fair enough.
Please keep going.
So then I was working as a busboy at a Jewish deli called Shopsy's, which I think is still around in some fashion or another. And one of the busboys who was a friend of mine quit. And I hadn't seen him for a while. He came in a couple of weeks later and I asked what happened to him. And he said he got a job as a DJ at a strip club, which sounded far more interesting. So I finangled my way into the strip club that he was working at, which was Fillmore's downtown Toronto, and I started working there during the day as a strip club DJ. And I was doing this because I wanted to tell jokes and be funny, but I had nothing to say. I was a callow youth or near youth of 21 at the time. So I had no life experience whatsoever. And I needed material. Everyone knows that, you don't have any material, dive into the world of sleaze, you're going to get material. There was lots of great material there. But I kept getting fired all the time because they didn't like my attitude and they didn't like my jokes. In between the girls, I would make jokes. They didn't like the jokes and they didn't like my music. What
sort of music did you play?
Well, I tried to make it interesting. Here's an example of a particularly memorable Halloween. I was dating a stripper at the time, and she was also, I guess she was a casual dominatrix. And she had an album, which I thought only my father had, which was an album of Hitler's speeches set to music. Traditional German music, which he would bring out at drunken parties in the 70s, entertain his guests. And this
was it Hitler or was it?
It was Hitler, yeah. And so this.
It wasn't a dramatic reading by Parker Posey or anything.
No. It was Adolf himself. And she had a copy of this album, and I was really impressed. And she said, "Okay, we don't have a lot of time to do this. I want you to." Every girl had 3 songs. Traditional format is a fast song, a medium pace song, and then a slow song for the floor show where the girls get on stage and they lie on the stage, and it's a gyno act, basically. First 2 are burlesque acts. The second one's a gyno act. And so she was mixing it up a bit. She said, okay, we don't have a lot of time here. The owner is upstairs. The owner, Bernie Stein, I believe his name was. All the Toronto strip joints are owned by ex-Jewish tailors who were given burlesque licenses. Limited burlesque licenses were given out by the city of Toronto in the late 60s. So overnight, they shut down their clothing shops and opened up strip joints. And Fillmore's is one of them. So the guy, Bernie Stein, was upstairs in the office counting his money, no offense. And the stripper was had in full Nazi drag. And she said, okay, I'm going to take my customer on stage on a dog leash, and I want you to play this Hitler speech with the oompa oompa Bavarian marching music in the background until we get shut down. We'll see how long we can do it. So I said, okay, fine. And I said, up next, whatever her moniker was, she went on stage with the businessman who was wearing a suit on all fours attached to a dog collar. And in the background, this lasted for about a minute and a half. And then Bernie Stein came running downstairs in hysterics, burst into the booth and said, shut it down, shut it down, shut it down.
It sounds like The Night Porter without any of the Italians.
Yeah, great movie, great movie.
Or were there Italians?
Was it shot in Italy? I can't remember.
Wasn't it Liliana
Are you talking about the actress? I think it was Joseph Losey.
I thought it was a Cavani.
You're probably right.
Anyway,
But that was an example of, yes, you're right. That was an example of the sort of stuff that I would do if I could get away with it at the club and they didn't like it, because pornography and sex work, just like any other outlaw culture, in order to maintain its existence, it has to, within the context of the world it's invented for itself, it has to be very conservative and disciplined, even though it's not a conservative
it's not a conservative
milieu, but in order to exist as a business,
yes,
it has to be.
Where was this?
This was 84.
So,
and then this was 85. And that same year,
in Toronto,
yes, at Fillmore's. So I got fired for that, but then I was rehired. And that same year, I met Hunter S. Thompson, who came to Fillmore's, because he was this sort of vaguely ties into the Menendez brothers. He was working at the O'Farrell Theater in San Francisco, where they shot Behind the Green Door. He was working there as the night manager, ostensibly to get material for a new Hunter S. Thompson gonzo novel, however he describes it.
Right. Half
fiction, half reality. And he was in Toronto to do a reading and thought he would check out the local strip clubs. Fillmore's is a giant hotel, and they had two stages at the time, one on the main floor and one on the upstairs part. And to save time, I would run up and down the stairs with cassettes for the girls back in the days when they used cassettes to have their set set up. I would run up to the upstairs stage or the downstairs stage, and I would go through the back stairwell to save time, and that's where Hunter S. Thompson was. I burst through the door, and there was this giant guy, really tall, taller than me, 6'5", smoking a cigarette. It was in the middle of winter, and he's got LL Bean shorts on, Converse sneakers, all the drag, the Hunter S. Thompson drag. The only thing that was missing was the cigarette holder itself, but he had the cap on, and he was with a blonde scribe from the Globe and Mail. I didn't realize that he was from the Globe and Mail. He looked like sort of a Euro trash minder or something, but he was a scribe for the Globe and Mail. So I stopped. I saw this figure, and it was clear who he was, and I was sort of awestruck. And I thought, okay, I'm never going to see this guy again. I better make it count. So I said, "You look very familiar to me." And he answered in character, "Oh yeah, what do I look like?" So I thought I'll make an attempt to be witty, and I said, "You look like a part-time performance artist that I've heard about called Hunter S. Thompson." And then he was absolutely remarkable, really delightful. Eye contact. He asked more questions about me than I did him. Very gentlemanly, even though he was obviously flying high. Gave me 2 tickets to see his reading at the Phoenix Theater.
So he confessed to who he was.
Yes, he said, with very, very slyly. And then, so I'm doing a reading at the Phoenix, and said, I can't remember if he produced tickets or said he would get me on the list. And I said, of course. Thrilled to death. We parted ways. He asked me about what I did there, and I filled him in. Is this state of the art? And then we parted ways, and I went up to everybody and was bragging about who I just met. I was going up to all the girls, bartenders, bouncers, whoever. I just met Hunter S. Thompson. Who? Hunter S. Thompson. Hunter S. Thompson. He writes for Rolling Stone. The Rolling Stones have a writer? I thought they have writers as well. there's a magazine called Rolling Stone, and no one had any idea who this guy was. And so that fell on deaf ears. And then it turned out that he had to cancel his reading anyway because his son got into a motorcycle accident in Colorado. So he had to fly back, and he canceled the reading. It turned out that he postponed the reading for another 6 months. And 6 months later, he came back and remembered me, honored the offer, and said it was myself and someone else could come for free and see his reading at Phoenix again because he'd rescheduled it. But I couldn't get off work. By then, the management had gotten wind. The Globe Mail came up with an article mentioning my name and my encounter with Hunter S. Thompson, and it was a big deal. And so they knew who this guy was, and this time I had to promote it. And they were coming up to me saying, tell everybody we got a celebrity in the house, even though 6 months later they had no idea who this guy was. So I had to embarrass myself and introduce Hunter S. Thompson to the strip club denizens, none of whom cared and had any idea who he was anyway. The staff did at this point, but none of the customers. So I introduced him as a world-famous astronaut, which got a couple of laughs from his entourage. And then a bouncer came up to me and he said, it's a good thing that guy's a famous astronaut because he's in the washroom snorting rails like this fucking long, man. So blah, blah, blah. Anyway, that was that. And then I got away with, I was sort of given an extension because of the success of that to work there a little bit longer. And then I got fired another time when David Lee Roth came in. And David Lee Roth, who you like.
Yes.
The management was always giving me shit in the mid-'80s, even though that was the only time in history when hard rock was considered popular music in terms of Billboard popularity. The 80s, as we all know, was the hair metal decade. So I would play hard rock, and the management would always give me shit for it because they were out of step and out of touch and everything like that.
What did they want you to play?
They wanted just music, again, like we were discussing, anything that doesn't ruffle the feathers of the very conservative clientele. So nothing that would upset anybody, nothing aggressive, just pap, like Billy Joel or Madonna, that sort of stuff.
Both of whom were brilliant.
And so David Lee Roth came in with a very attractive looking leather maxi coat and entourage, and he sat by the bar. The manager, the toupee wearing manager named Dale Stinson, I think that was his name, came up to me and he said he was an aggressive closeted homosexual. Used to take out all his aggression on the poor strippers that worked there, all his frustration. And he came up to me and he said, but paradoxically, he didn't have an effeminate voice. He sounded a lot like Charles Bronson, which is very interesting. I told you, I told you, none of that hard rock music. They want some, but David Lee Roth's here now, so play some Van Halen. And I want you to mention that he's in the bar. It's a terrible Charles Bronson, a terrible Dale Stinson as well.
It's all right, Jason. We really do get the energy.
Thank you. Charles Bronson, there was a comic, an impressionist from the 70s, Fred Travellina, I think he did a really good Charles Bronson. You expecting to moan and groan for the rest of my life? It's like that, but slightly deeper. Anyway, so I had to mention the fact that David Lee Roth was in the bar and I had to play some Van Halen. So I said, Fillmore's would like to welcome David Lee Roth to Fillmore's in Toronto, Canada. And everyone cheered. And then I played a Van Halen song with Sammy Hagar singing vocals. And they all stormed out en masse. And then I was fired again. And I was fired. And then I was rehired in the early 90s. One of the owners he liked me for some reason and a friend of mine said I would be into working there if he wanted to hire me back. And I think they were desperate. So I was rehired in the early 90s and then fired for the final time. And I can't remember what my transgression was.
So how many firings are we talking about?
Multiple firings. And it was only that place though, for some reason. Because I also worked at the Brass Rail and there was never an issue there. And at one point I destroyed the sound system by knocking over a cup of hot chocolate into the sound mixer and the thing blew up and I still didn't get fired.
So when you perform at a comedy venue and you stain a painted wall with red wine, they should consider themselves lucky for just having sustained that minute amount of damage.
I'm anointing it. Yes, absolutely. And then, in between, Fillmore is the one with the brass rail, and then I went to New Orleans for a year and a half with my girlfriend at the time, and I worked at a strip club there, where I was attacked by a Cuban drug dealer who slashed open my arm with a whiskey glass. That was fun. The stabbing wasn't fun, but everything else was a little more fun. They gave me a little more time to do jokes and stuff like that. And I actually worked with a magician who had cancer of the larynx. So his entire act was completely nonverbal. And he used to, it sounds unbelievable. In fact, it sounds like the sort of thing that was, I thought, contrived. It's very contrived the way it was expressed in Desperately Seeking Susan, that whole sort of New York wacky, whimsical nightclub shit that was going on.
Yeah, so what didn't you like about? I just saw that movie for the first time last month.
Did you?
Yeah.
It just seemed to me like it seemed to be typical of those films that came out in the early mid-80s where they were trying to recapture the genuine eccentricity of the early mid-70s. But as we all know, the 80s was an ersatz decade. So everything was, is that the correct pronunciation? Ersatz? So I think, Definitely Seeking Susan seemed like an attempt at doing a wacky indie movie, which I didn't think was successful, but it was a hit of some kind. So, and who am I to judge it, right?
Well, it was part of this wave of films that also include Slaves of New York with Bernadette Peters, Something Wild with Melanie Griffith. And although it was almost 10 years later, I would say that the period at the end of that sentence, and perhaps the most triumphant and authentic of that subgenre, was Party Girl, one of my 5 favorite movies ever, starring Parker Posey and Guillermo Diaz.
Was that supposed to be about Sedgwick?
No, Party Girl was
90s
and it was about a woman in her early 20s who seemed a bit lost in her life and by day was working on herself such that she could become an excellent librarian. And at night was becoming disenchanted with, or perhaps, I don't know how to put it. The movie seems very simple, but it can be interpreted a lot of different ways. But let's just say librarian by day. Superficially, librarian by day, club kid by night. And then operating in the background is this dynamic between her and her boss, who also seemed to have been a surrogate parent once her mother died, disappeared in a haze of drug use and bad decisions. It's a dynamic that was borrowed by, I love her so much, that redhead, Natasha Lyonne. Natasha Lyonne took the same structure of that mythos and made it the basis of the relationship between her character and the psychoanalyst character in Russian Doll, which debuted on Netflix a few seasons ago.
Fuck, I saw a bit of Russian Doll. I didn't like it.
I loved it. What didn't you like about it? And then we'll get back to your bio. Unless you're sick of yourself, in which case we could just keep commenting on pop culture.
I didn't give it a fair shot, to be honest. Just as soon as they started, I watched the first episode where they were reconstructing the different scenes from different viewpoints, and it just seemed like every single fucking Netflix show was doing exactly the same thing. So I turned it off in disgust.
I never saw any other Netflix show that did that.
If it wasn't Netflix specifically, it seemed to be a sort of a cinematic or television gimmick that a lot of new films and TV shows were doing. It started with things like Memento, where everything, and it was done the best example, that was Irreversible by Gaspar Noé, where it was actually shot in reverse from beginning to end.
Wow.
I think Memento was as well, but I think the most successful version was example of this technique style was Irreversible.
You know what I consider to be a deviation of that? I think the name of the movie is Brown Bunny. It was directed by and starred Vincent Gallo. That sequence, the opening title sequence, circling around the racetrack so many times, inducing and eliciting such boredom and frustration in the audience. What Brown Bunny did, what Warhol's early films did.
Yeah.
What the first season, though not the second season of Russian Doll, because it was structurally a totally different show the second season is they deprioritize what's happening on the, it's not about the story. It's about the experience of being in the audience and having your emotions manipulated by the filmmakers.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's something at its worst very indulgent and manipulative about that. But what I will give Russian Doll is that I was trying on my own, not a good idea, because what those old medieval rabbis say is true. It can drive you crazy. I was trying to study Kabbalah on my own.
While you were watching it?
Not while I'm watching it, but, you know, within the same time frame. And there's actually, so through the constant repetition of Russian Doll, I actually understood a conception of time and the multiverse that I wasn't getting from my self-directed Kabbalistic study.
Okay, well, in that case, it was a useful experience for you. But I would highly recommend that you watch Irreversible. And can I jump in and add,
Whatever you want.
So that...
This is your episode. You are one of my favorite people in the whole world.
Oh, very kind of you.
You had to be the first guest for the second season. So we can go back to your bio. You can give your pop culture. You know, I always enjoy a segment of the show where my guest, whose ass I kiss relentlessly in promo reels, tells me how bad my taste is in popular culture. So why don't you do that? Do you want to start with Billy Joel, Madonna, or Russian?
Well, I want to add a bit to the style of film that we're talking about,
yes,
which I think you'll find amusing.
But wait a minute. Do you agree that we're talking about the same subgenre, even if you and I don't know all of each other's references? It's the late 80s, early 90s capture of life in New York in the late 70s, early 80s.
Yes.
And it seemed to be packaged inside of this semi-fictional narrative.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, we are talking about the same thing. And they're all trying to capture the spirit and the success of those films that actually worked during that period.
The best one, the most authentic one, was Party Girl.
Now you're talking about
Party Girl was a few years after the last one, so it was like the very period at the end of that sentence. I think it's the one you might enjoy the most. It doesn't try to be cute. Desperately Seeking Susan tried to be cute.
Yes, it was too cute.
I like that. Although I'll be honest with you, very unpopular opinion, I actually think Who's That Girl was a better movie. When Who's That Girl came out, it was Madonna's second or third film. And I didn't like it as a kid. But since then, I've watched all of these screwball comedies from the 1940s starring actresses like Judy Holliday. And now I get the movie. I get that it's not that the set was cheaply produced. It's that they were using, I forget what they're called, but when they used to paint sets instead of using green screen.
Yeah.
So it was a 1940s movie made in the 80s. And I think the only major creative miscalculation in that whole movie was allowing Madonna to go through the whole movie using a voice that was straight out of the 1980s. Because what it did was it made her land as a bad actress. But she wasn't a bad actress. She was fantastic in it. But that the decision to let her use that voice ruined the movie for a lot of people. Anyway, I think Who's That Girl is a better movie than Desperately Seeking Susan. And I want to make a general point about all movies of the 1980s, even the trashy ones, the very mass market ones that you probably wouldn't have much of an interest in, is that in general, the pacing of those movies, like mid-80s to mid-90s, was uniformly so much better than the generations of movies that came after it. Those movies like Suspect with Cher and Dennis Quaid, I mean, not exactly an award winner, not exactly one of the 100, Criterion films of all time, but the pacing is amazing. The pacing of Basic Instinct is amazing. Even if you don't like it.
Basic Instinct was a masterpiece, but that came out in the 90s.
Early 90s.
Yeah, but still technically a 90s movie. There was a few freak occurrences in the early 90s where mainstream stuff actually worked.
Like what?
Basic Instinct, Nevermind, somewhat. And then obviously Tarrant provided a bit of an adrenaline boost, even though his stuff is very safe. At the time,
you're the only person in the world, and this is what I love about you. You're the only person in the world who would ever call his work safe. Why do you say that? Okay, so stop. That's really, really interesting, because on its face, it seems objectively untrue. But in my life, more women have rhapsodized about Kill Bill than men.
Absolutely. Look, he's trying to have it both ways. He's paying homage to the style of cinema, which is my personal favorite, but he's defanged it, and he's trying to have his cake and eat it too. He's trying to have the unpleasant sleaze and nihilistic tone of late 60s, early. But there is one of the reasons why those films worked so much was because there was some real ugliness in them, reflecting Vietnam and Altamont and all that sort of stuff. So there was rapes, freak murders, all that sort of stuff. Very, very misogynistic and anti-female, which is what made it exciting. And he tries to reproduce that, but you're no longer allowed to deal with that, those sort of themes or imagery realistically. You have to disguise it somehow. So he tries to have sleaze and violence, but then he'll, in order to make it a soft sell or a successful sell to the public and to the studios, he'll have female leads instead of male leads, and he'll hint at sexual impropriety and violence and exploitation. But the victims in the end are always, the bad guys always get it. The good guys are triumphant. And in his universe, the good guys are always women.
So your complaint is that it's too redemptive and too feminist and too much of an embodiment of the Hays Code.
It's like...
do you know what I mean by Hays Code?
Of course,
the Canadians
I know.
know what that is. I don't know if that...
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Of course. An embodiment of the Hays Code? That's it.
Well, the interesting thing is, if you set aside the physical representations of violence, in terms of script writing, his movies fall within the Hays Code. There's no such thing as an evil person who gets away with it in his movies.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Because that was so if you wanted to show something dastardly in a Hays Code movie, you could, but they really needed to.
Yes. Yeah. So you're absolutely right. I used to have a list of I had an image of the Hays Code from an old book I had when I was a kid, a poster with the 10 things on it. And the thing that I forgot about, the evil doer, that's the most obvious, but the thing that always stuck out in my mind was a woman with breasts holding a machine gun was not allowed. So he tries to circumnavigate that stuff by being cute and, yes, having the woman as the, it's like one of the worst films ever made, Natural Born Killers, where Juliette Lewis goes into a redneck diner and demos a couple of rednecks just because she's Juliette Lewis. It's that sort of mentality. It's sort of fallacious riot girl fantasy nonsense, which he's adopted because it's a popular, he wants to make money, and I don't blame him, good for him.
But do you think that's it? Or do you think it's also that on one hand, he has these adolescent attachments and fascinations for violence, but on the other hand, I don't know anything about his love life.
Yeah, neither do I.
So,
except he's got a foot fetish.
But it seems, doesn't everybody? Yeah. My mother says hello.
Hi, Susan.
I cannot believe that when we did a cold open to my old talk show, the one at the CFTA, that you actually for 10 minutes were able to slowly groom my mother to the point that she was just about on camera to start her OnlyFans.
There's time yet.
Yes. Well, there's time yet. And she has bought a new pair of lucite heels.
Oh, there's a lovely woman.
She is, you know what? I think she's interested in you.
Yeah.
I think she's interested in you, which would make you my stepfather. You know what one of my worst characteristics is?
What?
I am going to do everything I can to encourage this, because it doesn't matter to me that my mother will end up heartbroken because she won't be able to handle the stories of your past decrepitude and decadence. It doesn't matter to me that you will ultimately become disenchanted and disappointed and need to walk away because of her thoroughly middle-brow tastes, her affection to always stay close to a shopping mall, so on and so forth. I'm interested in pushing this romance as far as it'll go because I want another chapter from my memoir.
It's all material.
We don't have a retirement plan, Jason.
Okay, we'll see if we can facilitate that.
So that was a very interesting take on Quentin Tarantino.
Can I, before the end of this podcast?
This podcast is far from over.
Oh, okay.
We have lots of content to create together. Can I also tell you something that, so like Jake, the owner of the CFTA, one of the things that bonded me with Jake, and this is very strange, Jake and I both have minors in neorealist Italian film and translation.
Good God. Get any more specific?
So my favorite professor from that era of my life was named Jennifer Stone. She was a doctor in Freudian psychoanalytic film theory. She was from South Africa. I've lost touch with her. But she made this very interesting point that I actually agree with. And sometimes my memory plays tricks on me and I make stuff up because it sounds great. So I don't know if what I'm about to say is true. But I actually think that my high school English teacher, Francesco Sabetta, may have suggested this as well. The best director on the subject of the Italian-American experience is not Martin Scorsese, but Spike Lee. And
interesting.
The observation that I think my high school teacher, and I know for sure Jennifer Stone made, is that you are, with Martin Scorsese, tapped into a gold mine because Italians are the only ethnic subculture that loves being made fun of and put into their own and shown in their worst light. The obsession with violence, mafia antics, etc. And I'm not going to, in the context of this podcast, get into why that is. If you watch Scorsese, to be Italian is to be involved in organized crime. It's a very simple 1-to-1 ratio. That as someone, because I have an Italian adjacent ethnicity, you know, I'm Maltese. It's basically the same thing as Sicilian, just a little more provincial, and we have better pastries. But when you look at the way that Spike Lee handles Italians, not only in Do the Right Thing, but more importantly, in one of my 5 favorite films of all time, Summer of Sam. You hated Summer of Sam.
Well, I laughed a lot during the Summer of Sam.
I laughed a lot too, but I think that was on purpose.
The talking dog was...
I loved that. I love that. You know what else I loved? I loved when they called the local drug dealer half a fag, which made no sense to me because he was obviously a full fag. But
I don't remember that.
My first husband and I loved that movie so much that when we got really angry with each other, we would call each other half a fag and it would end the fight because we couldn't stop.
I used to live off of Queen Street in Toronto with some rednecks, and they would refer to me and my friends as half gay. It's Jason, there's half gay pals.
But what do you think of this idea of, because I think that although Spike Lee also shows the involvement of the aspect of organized crime in Italian-American life in the New York City metro area, that's not all he shows. He really does show a much fuller range. And in terms of his actual camera work,
Spike Lee?
Spike Lee. Did I say Scorsese?
No.
No, but Spike Lee, those brilliant dolly shots are reminiscent of a lot of post-neorealist, like Italian cinematography.
So give me some names of Italian neorealism, like Rossellini, or who is it?
Okay, so post-neorealist, I think the big one is Antonioni and Fellini, but neorealism is De Sica.
And neorealism is what decade or what decades?
It starts during, so the first neorealist film is a Sessione, which was an unauthorized adaptation of The Postman Always Rings Twice. That was
so 40s.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, like 41, 42, 43. It was set in the South. Now, this is my point of view. Other people say that the first neorealist film was, and my Italian's very bad, but Roma Città Aperta, Rome Open City with the
I think I've heard of that one.
With Anna Magnani. And neorealism was...
And that was 50s?
No, 40s.
It was still 40s?
Yeah. So neorealism was, we need a policeman for this scene. Let's talk a policeman into doing the part. It was handheld cameras.
Oh.
It was about handheld cameras.
Okay.
It was about what a lot of these movies did was they hired a professional actor for like the female lead and the male lead. Everyone else, they would pull off the street. They wouldn't get permits. They only use natural light.
So did that tradition spill over into spaghetti westerns? The idea of the casting using regular Joes?
I don't know. Here's what I can tell you. The Italian film industry was actually, I believe, the first major film industry outside of the United States.
I'm sure.
It's a fascinating history because they had extremely opulent
environment.
Movies in the 20s, but the country was very new. Italy, as it's currently constituted, it's a very new concept.
Yeah.
And so movies were part of creating this national mythos.
Right.
In the 1940s, Italy was hit very, very hard. And their whole reason for being in the Axis was strange. Mussolini hated Hitler until the very end. They refused to kill their intellectually, what's the correct phrase nowadays? They're retarded, they're elderly, they're gypsies, they're Jews. Italy, I know that I'm getting into a bit of a sidebar, but I really do find it fascinating that Italy and Germany were allies in a war, but they did not like each other. And it wasn't until the very, very end that Mussolini caved. But what's interesting is that for years, Mussolini said, we're not rounding up the Jews. We're not rounding up the Jews. We're not rounding up the Jews. And the strange thing is, Hitler was kind of like, okay. So what would have happened if other leaders had been like Mussolini? Now, listen, I'm not trying to defend Mussolini.
I think you are.
And
it's a good thing.
But well, you stepped on my punchline because I was going to say in my old age, I've become a fascist for completely different reasons. But I do find Italy's involvement in World War II to be extremely strange, extremely interesting, notable in that the movement towards fascism was very much inspired by an avant-garde arts and crafts movement, inspired which precipitated the current craze towards the carnivore diet by imploring Italian men to give up pasta because of the way it made them fat, docile, and as Marinetti said, tied to the apron strings of their mothers with strands of spaghetti. And out of this very, very strange time in Italian history, you get this very strange history of cinema. So there were these opulent musicals, and then that turned into this extremely stripped down. And you know what's really strange? You would think that there are so many people in the world who want to produce films as directors, as writers, as actors, that given the omnipresence of cell phones and the remarkably high quality of the cameras therein, that we would have access to so many guerrilla style movies winning awards. Because what does it, if you and I want to make a movie right now, we could do it for $1,000. It hasn't happened. It hasn't happened. But then in Italy, it did. And when you see the eruption of like a Cassavetes, to me, it really feels like an aftershock of that. I kind of went all over the place. My apologies.
No.
I'm going to zip my lip because it's your episode.
About neo.
And neorealism. So Italy started to get very, very wealthy. There was a miracle. And what that produced was this switch towards the opulent, the sophisticated, the films by Antonioni, for example, Story of a Love Affair, which was,
and I would guess Rossellini as well, right?
Yeah, but Antonioni with Story of a Love Affair. So here's the thing. So there was Ossessione was the unofficial film adaptation of The Postman Always Rings Twice. Then there was the middle class Hollywood adaptation of it. But then using the same male lead as in Ossessione, Antonioni, by the way, I forgot who made Ossessione. It was very embarrassing. I'm ashamed of myself. But Antonioni took the same male lead and retold the story in the wealthy North. And then there's one really interesting line in the movie that's something like, "You look very familiar." And he's like, "Well, I've done this with other women before," or something like that.
What's the title of the film?
The poor Southern version or the wealthy Northern version? Because they're both unauthorized remakes of the poor.
Oh, yes. Okay. All right. What's the...
So there had never been a movie made anywhere in the world that had showed the ravages of poverty and war like Ossessione.
Okay.
Which I personally prefer to Roma Città Aperta because that movie tried to pull at your heartstrings.
Ossessione is the director or the title of the film?
Ossessione is the name of the film.
Okay, and that's the remake.
No, it was the first film version
of
The Postman Always Rings Twice, but it was unauthorized. And Mussolini's son-in-law was the Minister of Propaganda. And he was like, there is no way that we're entering, because it was the middle of World War II. He said, there's no way that we're entering this into the international film festivals. And to his credit, Mussolini said, this film does not make Italy look great. It is one of the greatest works of art ever made. We're entering it.
That is great.
And
The Bicycle Thief was 40s.
The Bicycle Thief was De Sica. And that was in the same general period, showing all of that. Pretty.
Same idea, using non-professional actors and everything. Is that?
Yeah. Although that movie was none of the other movies had that element of magical realism, but it's that element of magical realism that as a child captivated Steven Spielberg, causing him to duplicate that scene with the bicycle over the moon in E.T.
Did you know that Joseph Goebbels wrote a novel, by the way?
I mean, he kind of had to, don't you think?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Perfect response. Yeah, before Douglas kicks us out, I wanted to tell you.
Stop trying to get out of this. You're here for another half hour. Why are you so resistant to podcasts and talk shows?
I'm just, I know, I'm just being, I don't.
You look great on camera.
Conscientious.
Is there something that you need to get to?
Not at all. Not at all.
Okay, what time is it?
2:53.
Okay.
The only reason I mentioned that is because I thought I heard you say to Douglas, if we're not out by 3, come and get us or something like that.
Right. So if he doesn't feel like waiting anymore, he'll come and get us.
All right. So that's why I want to tell
This
you
isn't just a church, Jason. This is a cultural center. This is a hotbed of creativity. We've got people building out a podcasting studio. We're building a secondary performance space. He's downstairs managing all sorts of Narcotics Anonymous type groups. The coffee. By the way, did I tell you why the coffee is the way that it is here?
Why?
So this church was opened in 1912. And it was built.
And coffee was brewed in 1912.
And it was built by Masons. And the building was designed so that Christianity. It's a United Church, it's not Catholic. So the idea behind this building was if they ever got sick of being Christians, they could strip out some of the superficial decor and turn it into a Masonic lodge. And this place is actually built the way that Masonic lodges are built, not the way that, a lot churches for a lot of denominations are built.
Gotcha.
And part of the design was caring about the experience. So the original inhabitants and executives and administrators and whatever for this church, as one generation gave way to the other, they would leave notes about how to do things.
Right.
So here were the instructions that they still follow to this day from 1912 in regard to the coffee. Do you want to hear it?
Sure.
Soap can never touch the urns.
Yes, that's true.
Use the cheapest coffee you can find.
Oh, I don't agree with that.
And to the coffee,
add some butter.
Add a teaspoon of salt and a teaspoon of mustard seed.
Okay, I've heard salt, but not mustard seed. Interesting.
So they've been following that recipe, and the strange thing about adding the mustard seeds is that no matter what coffee you use, the mustard seed modulates the flavor so that it always tastes like it's the same brand.
Great.
So where were we? Can I tell you one more piece of Italian cinematic trivia?
Yeah.
2 pieces. So this thing where you have a lead in a movie and then you have them play the role again is a very Italian thing. For example, there's this movie that Sophia Loren did. It's a devastating movie. Yet again, it takes place in the ravages of the South during World War II, all of the poverty, all of the desperation. And so Sophia Loren played the same role 30 years later, and she was still so hot that the fact that it was like physically impossible because she played the mother of a teenage girl, there's no way in hell she was too old, but she looked so great. So you had the 2 guys in the 2 versions of the Post twice. You had her doing 2 women twice. I would argue she looked hotter in the second version.
Yeah, she aged very well.
But then also Swept Away, the Lena Wertmuller film, when Guy Ritchie made it, or as you would put it, destroyed it with Madonna, it was the son of the male lead cast in the same role.
What is the name of the male lead from the Wertmuller film? He's aged very well. He's always looked like he's 60.
I forgot, but you know what? I found out something about Mediterranean skin. So Sicilians, Italians, Maltese, Lebanese, sometimes but not always, have a genetic variant that causes our skin. And this is why my mother and I look younger in the summer than in the winter, I think. So you know how like this, it damages your sun, it reduces the elastin and the collagen and all of that stuff. So there's a variant in both Ashkenazi and in Maltese skin that actually causes collagen production to improve with sun exposure.
Wow. You should market that.
I don't know how that would be some sort of peptide therapy, but that's why a lot of these Italian film stars, they look so fantastic in old age. The last piece of trivia that I want to give you is that in the 50s, Antonio did this movie called Le Amiche, and it's about 5 friends in a wealthy upper middle class suburb of Turin who experience the suicide of one of their friends, and they have to explore the mystery of what drove this friend of theirs to suicide, during which we get to see that this one's having an affair and this one is embezzling and all of that stuff. Now, if this sounds familiar to you, it's because when Mark Cherry walked into ABC to pitch Desperate Housewives, he said, I want to do a soap opera version of this movie. So Desperate Housewives is actually a remake of Le Amiche.
I quite enjoyed Desperate Housewives. So I'll put it down to Italian.
Why did you, you make fun of me every time that I express my affection for something the least bit mass market.
No.
You do. You do. Well, you still derive a certain sadistic joy from making me feel bad about my tastes. What is it about Desperate Housewives that you love?
Well, I didn't love it, but it was good, campy fun. If they weren't bound and restricted by television censors, it would have been great. By mainstream television censors, there could have been nudity in it. If it was an HBO series, it would have been better.
Well, there was an HBO version of it. That's basically what Big Little Lies was. Big Little Lies was nothing but an unauthorized remake of Desperate Housewives.
I'm not up on my
Nicole Kidman. It was fantastic, but it was nothing but a prestige television unauthorized remake of Desperate Housewives. I want to say something about Desperate Housewives. To me, it showed its genius over time. Once it started doing these wild time shifts, like there was one season that moved ahead 7 years, and there was another season that almost operated as a prequel. And when they started to do that, I started to see that either midway or perhaps at the beginning, I was never able to tell. The show seems very fluffy and frothy, but it's actually about the impact of time